The Shapeshifter. The annual camping trip had become a tradition for the group of friends, a way to reconnect and escape the pressure of their daily lives. But this year, something felt different from the moment they arrived at their usual spot in Willow Creek. Emily, always the most sensitive of the group, had felt chill run down her spine as they set up camp. "Guys, I don't know about this," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Something feels off." Elizabeth rolls her eyes, her practical nature asserting herself. You say that every year. It's just the woods playing tricks on your mind." But even Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that Emily might be right this time. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that set her teeth on edge. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing on setting her tent with practiced efficiency. Mark, ever the protector of the group, glanced around the clearing with wary eye. He'd served 2 hours overseas and prided himself on his ability to sense danger. Right now, every instinct was screaming at him that something wasn't right. But he kept his concerns to himself, not wanting to alarm the others. As night fell and the group gathered around the campfire, the tension in the air grew thicker. The flames cast flickering shadows that seemed to dance with life of their own, and the wind carried whispers that sounded almost like words. "So," Mark said, trying to lighten the mood, "who wants to hear a ghost story?" Emily shuddered. "Not me. I think it's creepy enough out there without adding to it." Elizabeth leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. "Oh, come on, Em. It's tradition. Besides, it's just a story. What's the harm?" Mark cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice low and ominous. "There's an old legend in these parts about creatures that stalking the woods. They say it can take on any form it chooses, man, beast, or something in between. It's called the Shapeshifter." Emily pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Mark, please, I really don't want to hear this." But Mark continued, caught up in the tale. "The Shapeshifter is as old as the forest itself. It feeds on fear, drawing strength from the terror of its victims. Some say it was once human, cursed by ancient magic to wander the woods for eternity, almost hungry, always hunting." A twig snapped at the darkness beyond the fire's light, causing Emily to jump. "What was that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Elizabeth put a comforting arm around her friend's shoulders. "It's nothing, Em. Probably just a rabbit or something." But Mark's eyes narrowed as he scanned the tree line. He'd heard something too, and it hadn't sounded like a rabbit he'd ever encountered. "Maybe we should call it a night," he suggested, his tone casual but his posture tense. As the group prepared for bed, the strange noises continued, growing louder and more frequent. Emily tossed and turned into her sleeping bag, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. In the tent next to hers, Elizabeth lay awake, her skepticism wearing with growing sense of unease. Mark took first watch, sitting by the dying embers of the fire with a flashlight in the hand. He told himself he was being paranoid, that there was nothing out there but normal forest creatures. But as the hours crept by, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was circling their camp, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was just before the dawn, when Emily's scream shattered the stillness of the night. Mark was on his feet in the instant, racing towards her tent. "Emily, what's wrong?" He unzipped the tent to find Emily huddled in the corner, her face pale with terror. "There was a face," she whispered, pointing to the side of the tent. "Right there, watching me." But it wasn't human, Mark. It was wrong. By now, Elizabeth had joined them, her hair amused from sleep, but her eyes alert. It was probably just a shadow or something. You're imagining playing tricks on you. But Emily shook her head vehemently. No, it was real. I saw it shift, and it changed like he couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. Mark's blood ran cold as he remembered the legend he recounted earlier. But that was just a story, wasn't it? It couldn't possibly be real. But the sun rose, casting long shadows through the trees. The group decided to cut their trip short. The atmosphere in the camp was tense as they packed up their gear, each of them jumping at every sound and movement in the surrounding forest. They were nearly finished when Mark spotted something that made his heart stop. There, at the edge of the clearing, was a footprint unlikely anything he ever seen before. It was large, easily twice the size of a human foot, with a long claw-like toes that dug deep into the soft earth. Guys, he called out, his voice tight with tension. You need to see this. Elizabeth and Emily gathered around, their faces paling as they looked at the bizarre track. What could have made that? Elizabeth whispered her, skepticism finally beginning to crumble. I don't know, Mark Rump replied, but I think we need to get out of here now. They grabbed their remaining gear, headed for the car, the feeling of being watched intensifying with every step. Emily kept glancing over her shoulder, convincing she could see something moving in the shadows between the trees. They were within sight of the car when they heard it, a low rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The group froze, their eyes pounding in their chests. Run! Mark shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her along. They sprinted for the car, adrenaline leading speed to their feet. As they reached the vehicle, they realized horror that the keys were missing. They must have fallen out of my pocket back at the campsite, Mark said, his voice tight with fear. Elizabeth spun around, her eyes wide as she scanned the forest. We have to go back for them. It's our only way out of here. But before they could move, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. It was tall, easily 7 feet in height, with a body that seemed to ripple and shift like smoke. Its face was a nightmare, constantly changing from human to animal to something utterly alien. Well, the creature said, its voice a harsh rasp that sent shivers down their spines. What do we have here? 3 little morsels ripe for the taking. Emily screamed, the sound echoing through the trees. Mark stepped in front of the women, his fists clenched at his sides. Stay back, he warned. Though he knew his words were meaningless against such a creature, the shapeshifter laughed, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, I do love it when they try to be brave. It makes the fear so much sweeter. When I finally break them, it took a step forward, its form rippling with changing. One moment, it was a massive bear, the next a snarling wolf, and then something straight out of a nightmare, all teeth and claws and glowing eyes. Elizabeth, her face pale but determined, grabbed a branch from the ground and brandished it like a weapon. We're not going down without a fight, she declared, her voice shaking, her resolute. The shapeshifter's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. A fight? Oh, my dear, you have no idea what you're up against. I'm as old as these woods, as ancient as fear itself. Your pitiful resistance is nothing more than a game to me. It lunged forward with an inhuman speed, its claws raking the air where Elizabeth's head had been a moment before she stumbled backwards, the branch falling from her nerveless fingers. Mark tackled the creature, his military training kicking as he grappled with its constantly shifting form. But it was like trying to fight smoke. The shapeshifter slipped from his grasp, reforming behind him with a chilling laugh. "Run!" Mark shouted to the women. "I'll hold it off." Emily and Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, torn between fear and loyalty, but Mark's pleading look convinced them, and they took off into the woods, their hearts pounding in their ears. The shapeshifter watched them go with a predatory grin. "How noble," it said to Mark. "But do you really think you can save them? I know these woods better than you know your own mind. They'll never escape me." Mark stood his ground, his fists raised in a fighting stance. "Maybe not," he growled, "but I'm sure as hell going to make you work for it." He charged forward, throwing a punch that would have felled by normal opponent, but the shapeshifter simply dissolved around his fists, reforming behind him with a cruel laugh. "Is that the best you do?" it taunted. "I've faced warriors and monsters that could make your blood run cold. You're nothing but an insect to me." But even as it spoke, something changed in the air, a tension, like the moment before the lightning strike. The shapeshifter's form flickered, its confident grin faltering for a moment. "No," it hissed. "Not here, not now." A brilliant light flooded the clearing, as bright the mark had to shield his eyes. When he could see it again, he gasped in awe of the figure standing before him. She was beautiful in a way that defied description. Her long black hair flowing as if it had unseen wind, her eyes spinning with an inner light that spoke of power beyond mortal comprehension. "You dare to hunt my forest shapeshifter?" she said, her voice like the chiming of crystal bells. "You know the ancient laws. These mortals are under my protection." The shapeshifter snarled, its form rippling with rage and fear. "Guardian," it spat, "this is one of your concern. The mortals entered my domain of their own free will. They are mine to claim." The Guardian's eyes flashed, and the very air seemed to tremble. "You overstep your bounds, creature of darkness. These woods are mine, as they have been since the world was young. You are tolerated here, nothing more." She raised her hand, and a shaft of pure light lands from her fingertips, striking the shapeshifter. It howled in agony, its form twisting and contorting as it tried to escape the burning radiance. "Begone!" the Guardian commanded, her voice ringing with power. "Return to the shadows where you belong. And know that if you trouble these mortals again, your existence will be forfeit." With a final agonized shriek, the shapeshifter vanished, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and a lingering sense of a dread. Mark stared at the Guardian, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. What are you?" he managed to ask. She turned to him, her smile gently, but her eyes full of ancient wisdom. "I am the Guardian of this forest, young one. I have watched over these woods since before your kind learned to walk upright." "My friends," Mark said, suddenly remembering Emily and Elizabeth. "Are you safe?" The Guardian nodded. "They are unharmed. I have placed them in a deep sleep and returned them to your campsite. They will remember nothing of this encounter when they wake." Mark frowned. "But I'll remember." "Why?" "Because you showed true courage in the face of terror," she replied. "You are willing to sacrifice yourself to save your friends. Such bravery deserves recognition." She reached out and touched Mark's forehead. A warm tingling spread through the body, and he felt stronger, more alive than he ever had before. "I have granted you a portion of my power," the Guardian said. "Use it wisely, and know that you may call upon me in times of great need." Before Mark could respond, the Guardian began to fade. Her form became translucent. "Remember, brave one," her voice echoed as she disappeared. "The darkness may be powerful, but it can never truly defeat the light." And then she was gone, leaving Mark alone in the clearing, He stood there for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened. Part of him wondered if it all had been a dream, some kind of shared hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion. But as he made his way back to the campsite, he could feel the Guardian's power thrumming through the veins. This had been as real as anything he'd ever experienced. He found Emily and Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in their tents. As the Guardian had said, as the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, they began to stir. "Mark," Emily called out, her voice thick in sleep. "What time is it?" "Time to go home," he replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "I think we've had enough camping for one trip." As they packed up the camp and loaded the car, Mark noticed Emily and Elizabeth exchanging confused glances. They clearly had no memory of the night's events, just as the Guardian had promised. Part of him wanted to tell them everything, to share the burden of knowledge that now weighed on his shoulders. But he remembered the Guardian's words about using his gift wisely, and he kept silent. As they drove away from the Willow Creek, Mark couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, he thought he saw a shimmering figure standing at the edge of the forest, raising a hand in the farewell. He smiled to himself, feeling a mixture of awe and responsibility. The world was bigger, stranger than he had ever imagined, filled with both darkness and light, and now, whether he liked it or not, he was a part of that hidden world. As the forest receded behind them, Mark made a silent vow. He would use the Guardian's gift to protect others, to stand against the darkness that lurked in the shadows. It wouldn't be easy, and he knew he would face challenges he couldn't even imagine. But for now, he was content to drive his friends home, listening to their chatter about plans for their next venture. Little did they know that their ordinary lives had brushed up against something extraordinary, something that changed the course of the futures in ways that couldn't possibly fathom. And deep in the forest, both the Guardian and the Shapeshifter watched the departing car, one with hope for the future and the other with a burning desire for revenge. The ancient battle between light and darkness would continue, with Mark now unwittingly as its center. That was a story for another day. In the months following their fateful camp trip, Mark found himself increasingly drawn into the hidden world he glimpsed in Willow Creek. The Guardian's gift manifested in subtle ways he heightened senses, quicker reflexes, and an uncanny ability to sense danger. At first, he tried to ignore these changes to return his normal life, but the knowledge of what lurked in the shadows made that possible. Emily and Elizabeth noticed the change in her friend. Their friend Mark seemed more distant, always on edge, as listened for something they couldn't hear. When they pressed him about it, he brushed off their concerns with a forced smile and change of subject. It was a crisp autumn evening, nearly a year after their camping trip. Everything changed. Mark was walking home from work when he felt a familiar chill run down his spine, the same feeling he had in Willow Creek. He quickened his pace, eyes scanning the darkened streets. A scream pierced the air, coming from a nearby alley. Without hesitation, Mark ran towards the sound. As he turned the corner, he saw a scene that made his blood run cold. A figure that seemed to shift with twists in impossible ways looming over a terrified woman. The shapeshifter turned to face Mark, its eyes glowing with a malevolent recognition. "You," it hissed, "the Guardian's pets. I've been waiting for this moment." Mark's mind raced. He wasn't in Willow Creek, far from the Guardian's domain. He was on his own. But as the creature lunged towards him, Mark felt the power of the Guardian had gifted him surge through his body. He dodged the attack with inhuman speed, his hand glowing with a faint light as he struck back. The shapeshifter howled in pain, his form rippling and distorting. This isn't over, it snarled before melting into the shadows. The woman stared at Mark in shock and awe. What? What was that thing? And how did you? Mark helped her to her feet, his mind whirling. He couldn't keep the secret any longer. Now that the shapeshifter was hunting in the city, I think it's time I told some friends a story, he said, more to himself than to the woman. The next day, Mark called Emily and Elizabeth, asking them to meet him at his apartment. When they arrived, they found him pacing nervously, his face etched with worry. Mark, what's going on? Elizabeth asked, her practically nature giving way to concern. You've been acting strange for months now. Mark took a deep breath. Do you remember our camping trip last year in Willow Creek? Emily shuddered. How could I forget? That was the creepiest night of my life. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. What if I told you, Mark said slowly, that it wasn't just your imagination, that there really was something out there in those woods? Over the next hour, Mark encountered everything that had happened that night, the shapeshifter, the guardian, and the gift he'd been given. As he spoke, he could see the disbelief in his friends. Eyes slowly give way to a mix of fear and awe. Why didn't you tell us before? Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how, Mark admitted, and part of me hoped that if I didn't talk about it, it would all just go away, but it hasn't. And now the shapeshifter is here in the city. Emily's face paled. What do we do? Before Mark could answer, a cold wind swept through the apartment, extinguishing the lights. In the sudden darkness, they heard a familiar, chilling laugh. How touching! The shapeshifter's voice echoed from every corner. A reunion of old friends, and just in time for me to have my revenge. Mark's hand began to glow, illuminating the room. The shapeshifter stood before them, its form constant shifting between horrifying visages. Run! Mark shouted at Emily and Elizabeth, but as they turned to flee, they found their path blocked by writhing shadows. No one's going anywhere. My apologies. The shapeshifter hissed, I've waited so long for this moment. Mark stepped forward, his entire body now glowing with the Guardian's power. This ends now, he declared, his voice ringing with an authority he didn't know he possessed. The shapeshifter laughed. You think you can defeat me, mortal? I am ancient beyond your comprehension. The Guardian's parlor tricks are nothing compared to my power. But as the creature spoke, Mark felt a presence in his mind, warm, comforting, and incredible powerful. The Guardian's voice echoed in his thoughts. You are not alone. Brave one, call upon the light, and I will answer. Understanding flooded through Mark. He raised his hands, and brilliant light erupted from his palms. Shapeshifter screamed in agony, its form beginning to dissolve. No, this isn't impossible. This is impossible. Mark's voice mingled from the Guardians as he spoke. You have plagued this world for too long. Creature of darkness, your time is at end. The light grew brighter, filling the entire apartment. Emily and Elizabeth shielded their eyes, but they could hear the shapeshifter's agonized shrieks. When the light finally faded, the creature was gone, leaving behind only a faint wisp of shadow that quickly dissipated. Mark swayed on his feet, drained by the enormous expenditure of energy. His friends rushed on his side, supporting him as he sank to the floor. Is it over? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Mark nodded, a tired smile on his face. It's over. The shapeshifter is gone. As if in response to his words, a gentle breeze filled the room, carrying with it the scent of pine and wildflowers. The guardian's voice, audible to all of them now, spoke. You have done well, Mark. The ancient evil that was the shapeshifter is no more. But remember, brave ones, that this is not the end of your journey. Where there is light, there will always be shadows seeking to extinguish it. Be vigilant, be brave, and above all, stand together. The presence faded, leaving the three friends alone in the apartment. They looked at each other, a mix of emotions playing across their faces. Relief, exhaustion, and a dawning realization of the responsibility that now shared. So, Elizabeth said after a long moment of silence, what do we do now? Mark stood up, his strength slowly returning. He looked at his friends, seeing not just Emily and Elizabeth, but fellow guardians of the light. Now, he said, we protect others from the things that lurk in the dark. Together. Emily and Elizabeth nodded, a new determination in their eyes. They had glimpsed the world beyond their understanding, faced an ancient evil, and emerged victorious. Their ordinary lives, here behind them now, were replaced by a calling greater than they could have imagined. As the first light of dawn broke through the windows, the three friends stood together, ready to face whatever challenges the hidden world might bring. They knew that their battle against the darkness was just beginning. With the Guardian's blessing and their unbreakable bond, they were prepared for whatever might come. The shapeshifter was gone, but other dangers would surely arise. And when they did, Mark, Emily, and Elizabeth would be there, guardians of the light, protectors of the innocent, and friends united in a cause greater than themselves. Their camping trip had been the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Now, as they looked to the future, they knew that their greatest adventures and greatest challenges lay ahead. But whatever came, they would face it together, armed with courage, friendship, and the power of the light.